I want you to imagine this. For 24 years, I lived believing my father died in a car crash when I was just 4 years old. That loss shaped every part of who I became. But last month, while cleaning out my mother's attic, I opened a locked trunk that had been hidden away my entire life. Inside, I found something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. My father's passport, a video camera with a tape, and a letter addressed to me in his handwriting. In that moment, my heart dropped because the truth was impossible to ignore. He had not died. He had been alive, and my family kept it from me. This is not just about discovering a lie. It is about finding out that the people I trusted most, my mother, my uncle, even my grandfather, chose to bury the truth. And what my father revealed on that tape about them shook me to my core. I'm Ethan Cole. My mother is Marion, the woman who raised me alone after my father's supposed death. My father's name is Daniel, the man I grew up imagining but never really knew. My Uncle Rob was the fun one, always stepping in to fill the gap left behind, and my grandfather Henry was the quiet, distant presence who never quite looked me in the eye. These people shaped my world, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question how well anyone can ever really know their own family. My name is Ethan Cole. I am 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been built around a single belief. My father died in a car crash when I was 4. That was the story my mother told me. That was the story my family supported with silence and sad looks whenever I asked questions. And because I was a child desperate for stability, I believed it. I grew up in a modest 2-story home on a quiet street in Ohio. My mother, Marion, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and to make sure I had what I needed. She was strict, protective, and often tired, but she was there. She packed my lunches, helped me with homework, and attended every parent-teacher conference. To the outside world, she was a strong single mother doing her best. To me, she was the only parent I had. But even when I was young, I felt the gap where my father should have been. Other kids would talk about their dads teaching them how to ride a bike or taking them fishing, and I would sit quietly, unsure what to say. My mother tried to fill that space with reassurance. She would tell me, "Your father loved you more than anything, Ethan. You carry his spirit in you." Those words helped me fall asleep at night, but they also left me with questions I never had the courage to ask. The only images I had of my father were framed photographs scattered throughout the house. In them, Daniel Cole looked tall and confident, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to hold secrets. He wore button-down shirts rolled at the sleeves, the kind of man who looked ready to work, but also ready to laugh. I studied those photographs countless times, memorizing every detail. As I got older, I wondered if I would ever resemble him, if my voice would sound like his, if he would have been proud of me. My mother rarely spoke about him beyond short answers. If I asked how they met, she would brush it off with, "We were young, it was simple." If I asked what kind of man he was, she would pause and then say, "He was complicated, but he loved you." That word, complicated, was heavy, and even as a child I felt its weight. My Uncle Rob was different. He was Marion's younger brother, a man who carried himself with a looseness my mother never allowed herself. Rob came around during holidays and birthdays, always bringing gifts that felt larger than life. When I was 10, he gave me my first baseball glove. When I was 13, he bought me a used bike from a neighbor and told me to ride it until the wheels fell off. Rob laughed loud, drank too much, and told stories that filled the room. Sometimes, after a few drinks, he would talk about my father in a way no one else did. "Your old man could light up a room," he once said, his voice thick with nostalgia. He wasn't perfect, but he had a fire in him. But before I could press for more, my mother would cut in sharply. "Rob, that's enough." And just like that, the curtain would drop. Then there was my grandfather Henry, my father's father. He was a tall man with a strong jaw, but time had carved deep lines into his face. Whenever he visited, which was rare, he carried a stiffness around me. as if being near me brought up something he wanted to forget. He would pat me on the shoulder, ask how school was going, and then retreat into silence. When I was younger, I thought maybe I had disappointed him somehow, that I wasn't the kind of grandson he wanted. Only later did I realize his distance was connected to something bigger. Growing up without a father left a mark on me that I could never fully shake. I was quiet in school, the kid who preferred books and sketching over team sports. I struggled with trust, always fearing people might leave the way my father supposedly had. Relationships were difficult. I wanted connection but carried a constant suspicion that it could vanish without warning. As an adult, I built a life that looked stable on the surface. I worked in IT support for a small company in town. It paid the bills, but it never felt meaningful. My apartment was simple: a couch, a TV, shelves with books, and a desk where I spent too much time scrolling through job boards, wondering if I was missing something. Friends invited me out for drinks and small adventures, but I often declined, telling myself I was too tired. The truth was, I carried a quiet loneliness I didn't know how to fix. Through all of it, my mother remained the constant force in my life. She called me every Sunday, asking if I was eating well, if I was saving money, if I was dating anyone. Her concern was real, but her conversations always had boundaries. I learned never to bring up my father. If his name slipped out, her face would harden, and she would say, "There's no use reopening wounds." By the time I turned 28, I had accepted my life as it was. I believed my father's story was finished, that my family had given me all the truth I was ever going to have. But beneath that acceptance was a restless energy, a quiet suspicion that something was missing. I felt it when I looked at my father's photograph on the bookshelf. I felt it when my uncle's stories stopped short. I felt it when my grandfather avoided my eyes. At that point, I had no idea how right I was. I had no idea that a single discovery in my mother's attic would break open the life I thought I understood and force me to confront truths I was never supposed to know. The day everything shifted began like any other. My mother had called me earlier in the week, asking if I could come over to help her clear out the attic. The roof had sprung a minor leak during a storm, and she wanted to move boxes before water damaged anything important. I didn't think much of it. Clearing an attic sounded tedious, but helping her was second nature. She raised me alone, after all. If she needed me, I showed up. When I arrived, she was already standing at the base of the attic ladder with her sleeves rolled up. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her frame a little more fragile, but her voice was still firm. "We need to get this done before the contractor arrives next week," she said, handing me gloves. I followed her up into the narrow space, ducking beneath the wooden beams. Dust coated everything, and the air smelled of insulation and old cardboard. We started shifting boxes together. Some were filled with old clothes, others with holiday decorations. I found my childhood toys in one bin, a jumble of action figures and stuffed animals I hadn't seen in years. Holding them brought a brief flash of warmth, but it quickly faded when I glanced at my mother. She was moving quickly, almost nervously, pushing boxes aside as if she knew exactly what she wanted to avoid. That was when I noticed the trunk. It was shoved against the far wall, half covered by a yellowing tarp. It was large, heavy-looking, and secured with an old brass lock. Something about it stood out. It wasn't like the other boxes that looked worn from years of use. This trunk was deliberate, as if it had been placed there with the intention of never being touched again. I pointed toward it. "What's in that one?" My mother's head snapped up. For a moment, her expression shifted from control to panic, a flicker so fast I almost doubted I saw it. "That's just old junk," she said quickly. "Things from before you were born. Leave it where it is." Her tone was sharper than usual, the kind of tone she used when she wanted a subject closed. But instead of shutting me down, it only lit a fire inside me. My entire childhood had been defined by closed doors and unanswered questions. Something in her urgency told me that trunk held answers she didn't want me to see. I pressed a little. If it's just junk, why not toss it? She straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans. Her eyes locked on mine. Ethan, some things are better left alone. That sentence stopped me cold. She had said those words before whenever I asked about my father. Now she was saying them again, this time about the trunk. My heart began to pound. I nodded slowly, pretending to let it go, but inside, I knew I couldn't. We finished clearing the rest of the attic in silence. My mother avoided looking at the trunk, and I avoided pushing her further. But the weight of it pressed against me the entire time. When I left that evening, the image of the brass lock stayed lodged in my mind. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At work, while answering calls and troubleshooting software issues, my thoughts drifted back to the attic. At night, lying in bed, I replayed her reaction over and over. Her fear, her urgency, her insistence that I leave it alone. It didn't feel like she was protecting me from useless junk. It felt like she was hiding something. The conflict tore at me. On one side was loyalty to my mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for me. On the other side was a gnawing suspicion that my entire life had been built on half-truths. I felt torn between respecting her boundaries and claiming my right to know the truth about my own family. One evening, the decision was made for me. My mother called to say she would be staying late at work all week to cover for a coworker. That meant the house would be empty. The temptation was too strong. I drove over the next night, my heart pounding as I let myself in with the spare key she had given me years ago. The house felt strangely quiet. I moved carefully, every creak of the floorboards echoing in my chest. I climbed the attic ladder with a flashlight in my hand, feeling the air grow colder as I pulled myself into the space. And there it was, waiting exactly where I had last seen it. The trunk. I crouched beside it, running my fingers along the surface. The brass lock was rusted but sturdy. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away, to respect her warning, to leave the past where it was. But another part of me, louder and more desperate, screamed that this was my chance to finally understand who I was. I grabbed a screwdriver from my backpack and jammed it into the lock. It resisted, groaning against the pressure until with one final push, it snapped open. The lid creaked as I lifted it, releasing a stale breath of air trapped inside for decades. Inside were objects that froze me in place. A U.S. passport with my father's picture, dated years after the supposed crash. A video camera, old but still intact, with the tape labeled in block letters. For Ethan, and a sealed envelope, with my name written in handwriting I recognized from old birthday cards my mother had saved. My father's handwriting. I sank to the floor, the weight of the discoveries pressing down on me. My entire body trembled as I held the passport in my hands. The date confirmed what my heart already knew. My father had not died when I was 4. He had lived for years after, and my family had known. The attic felt smaller, the air heavier. Questions screamed in my mind. Why would they lie? Where had he gone? And why now, after so many years, was I only finding this? At that moment, the conflict became clear. My mother's warnings, my uncle's silences, my grandfather's distance, it all pointed to a conspiracy of silence. They had chosen to keep me in the dark. And now, I had to choose whether to obey the life they had constructed for me or to tear it open and face the truth that had been buried for 24 years. I carried the items from the attic down to my car with my heart hammering so loudly it felt like the whole neighborhood could hear it. I drove back to my apartment in silence, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I needed to. Every red light felt like it lasted forever. Every green light felt like a push toward something I wasn't ready to face. When I finally stepped into my living room, I placed the passport, the envelope, and the video camera on my coffee table. They sat there like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged. The passport was proof. The envelope was personal. But the video camera was alive in a way the others weren't. It promised a voice, a face, and answers that paper alone could never give. Still, I hesitated. I paced the living room, telling myself I should wait, that maybe I should talk to my mother before I did something irreversible. But every time I thought about her face in the attic, about her sharp voice telling me to leave the trunk alone, the hesitation turned into anger. I whispered to myself, if he left this for me, it's because he wanted me to see it. That thought gave me the push I needed. The camera itself was old, a handheld model I remembered seeing in family videos from the early 2000s. I found the power cord tucked in the trunk and plugged it in. The battery light flickered faintly. My chest tightened as I ejected the tape, saw the label with my name again, and slid it back inside. The act felt ceremonial, like unlocking a door I had been kept away from my whole life. As the screen flickered to life, I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands pressed against my knees to stop them from shaking. The tape clicked, static filled the screen, and then a picture formed. A man appeared. It was him, Daniel Cole, my father. He looked older than the photographs I grew up studying, but his features were unmistakable. His hair was darker, flecked with gray at the temples. His eyes carried the same warmth I remembered from pictures, but they were heavier now, shadowed by exhaustion. He sat in a dimly lit room, the background bare, except for a plain wall and a chair. He leaned toward the camera, close enough that I could see the lines around his mouth. And then he spoke. "Ethan," he said, his voice deep, steady but weighted with something I couldn't yet name. "If you are watching this, it means you've found what your mother never wanted you to see." Hearing my name in his voice almost broke me. It was the first time in 24 years that I had heard him speak directly to me. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. He continued, "I want to tell you the truth, son. You deserve that. You've lived long enough without it." I froze, torn between pressing pause to collect myself and leaning forward to catch every word. My mind was a storm. I had imagined this moment for years, the impossible fantasy of my father speaking to me. Yet here it was, real, unfolding in front of me, and I wasn't ready for it. I clenched my fists and forced myself to keep watching. "I never died in a car accident," he said. "That was the story your mother told you because she thought it was the safest way to protect you. The truth is harder to hear, but it's yours to carry now, and you'll need to decide what to do with it." I pressed a hand against my chest, trying to steady the pounding inside me. His words sliced through the foundation of my life. Everything I had been told, every sad bedtime story about loss and tragedy, was a lie. My father had not been a ghost. He had been out there, alive, while I grew up believing he was buried. The urge to stop the tape and tear open the letter was strong, but I resisted. The letter could wait. The man in front of me was alive in a way no envelope could replicate. Daniel leaned closer, his eyes narrowing with urgency. "I made mistakes, Ethan. Mistakes that forced your mother and me to make choices you were too young to understand. Choices that cost me everything, including you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to believe all of this, but I need you to hear it from me, not from anyone else." I sat frozen, feeling both anger and longing crash together inside me. Here was the father I had missed my whole life, finally explaining himself, yet he was also the man who had abandoned me. I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he let me grow up with emptiness where he should have been. At the same time, I wanted to reach through the screen and pull him into my life. The decision to watch the tape was not just about satisfying curiosity anymore. It became the line between the life I thought I knew and the one that was waiting to be revealed. I understood in that moment that no matter what came next, I could never return to ignorance. I leaned forward, whispering to the screen as if he could hear me. "I'm here. Say it, tell me everything." The screen flickered, his voice steadied, and I braced myself. I knew that whatever came next, would not just change how I saw my father. It would change how I saw my mother, my uncle, and my grandfather, and it would change how I saw myself. I pressed my palms together, staring at the man on the screen. This was the turning point. I was no longer a boy wondering about the father he lost. I was a man about to learn why his family had lied to him for 24 years. The screen steadied, and my father leaned back in his chair as if bracing himself for what he was about to say. His voice grew heavier, lower, the kind of tone that carried truths too large to keep inside any longer. "Ethan, I need you to listen carefully. Your mother told you I died in a car crash, but the truth is that I had to disappear. I wasn't taken from you by fate. I was taken by choices, some mine, and some made by people in this family you thought you could trust." My breath caught in my throat. My body tensed as if every muscle was preparing for impact. I had braced for a revelation, but I wasn't ready for him to say the word family. He continued, "I was involved in business I should never have touched. I was young, reckless, and desperate to provide more than I had. I worked with people who were dangerous. I borrowed money I couldn't pay back, and before I knew it, I was in deeper than I could escape. Your mother begged me to stop. I didn't listen. I thought I was smarter than the men I was dealing with. I wasn't. They came for me. They threatened your mother. They threatened you." I gripped the edge of the couch, my nails biting into the fabric. His words painted a picture I never imagined. All my life I thought my father had been taken by accident, but now I saw him standing on a cliff edge of his own making, dragging our family into the storm with him. He leaned forward again, his face close to the camera. "The night of my supposed death, there was no accident. There was a confrontation, and it wasn't strangers who sealed my fate. It was someone close. Your Uncle Rob." I gasped so loudly it startled me. My chest tightened and heat spread up my neck. Uncle Rob, the man who gave me baseball gloves, who told jokes at birthdays, who filled my childhood with the laughter my mother could never provide. My uncle had been a part of this? Daniel's voice shook with restrained anger. Rob owed money too. He thought he could save himself by handing me over, by telling them where I'd be. I barely escaped with my life. That night was the end of everything. Your mother and I made the choice to disappear me from your life. She told you I was dead, and I let her, because the truth was more dangerous than the lie. I lived under names that weren't mine. I slept in places you'll never see. And every day I thought of you. But I couldn't come back. If I did, you would have been the one to pay for my mistakes." My mind reeled. I remembered the way Uncle Rob's stories about my father always stopped short, how his smile sometimes faltered when I asked too much. I remembered my mother cutting him off when he slipped into nostalgia. The puzzle pieces that never fit together suddenly slammed into place, forming a picture I could barely stand to look at. Daniel rubbed his face with his hands, his voice quieter now. "Your grandfather knew too. Henry couldn't look at you because you reminded him of me, of what I had become. He wanted your mother to cut ties completely, but she couldn't. She loved me, even after everything. She chose to protect you the only way she thought she could. By burying me, I felt my stomach twist, my body shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. The silence I had endured my whole life wasn't just sadness. It was guilt. It was shame. It was a conspiracy built on blood and fear." My father's eyes softened as he looked into the lens. "I don't know if I did the right thing by staying away. Maybe I should have fought harder to come back. Maybe I should have risked everything to be with you. But if you hate me for it, I understand. You deserved a father, and instead you got a ghost. That's on me." Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to scream at him, to demand why he had left me to grow up with nothing but framed photographs and silence. I wanted to shake the screen and force him to step out of it, to sit in front of me and face what he had done. But more than anything, I wanted the comfort of hearing him say he loved me. As if he knew, Daniel's voice broke. Ethan, I love you. That has never changed, not for 1 second. Every choice I made, as wrong as it was, came from fear of losing you. I thought the lie would keep you safe. But lies have a way of eating through everything. If you are watching this, it means the truth has finally come out. And now it's yours to carry. Be stronger than I was. Do not let the weight of our family's mistakes crush you. The tape clicked, and the screen went black. I sat motionless, staring at the reflection of my own stunned face. My entire body was trembling. I had just been handed the truth I spent my whole life craving, but it was poisoned with betrayal. My father had not died. He had abandoned me to protect me. My uncle had sold him out. My mother had chosen silence. My grandfather had turned away. The anger surged first, hot and consuming. They had stolen 24 years from me. They had forced me to live with half a story, while they carried the other half in secret. But underneath the anger was grief, deeper than anything I had ever known. I grieved the father I thought I lost. I grieved the childhood I should have had. And now I grieved the family I could no longer trust. As the room around me blurred through tears, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The truth had come alive in my living room, and it had destroyed the foundation of my life. I barely slept after watching the tape. The words of my father echoed in my head, colliding with every memory I carried from childhood. I thought of my uncle's laughter, my grandfather's silence, and my mother's sharp warnings whenever I asked too many questions. I could not escape the truth anymore. I had to confront it, and that meant confronting her. The next morning, I drove to my mother's house before I could lose my nerve. The sun was just rising, casting pale light across the quiet street. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. When I parked and stepped out, my chest felt like it carried a weight I could no longer bear. She was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked surprised to see me so early, her hair still loose from sleep, a mug of coffee in her hand. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked. I placed the letter on the table between us. Her eyes froze on it. The color drained from her face. "You knew," I said, my voice low but steady. "You told me he died. You told me I lost him. But I didn't lose him. You took him from me." Her hand trembled around the mug. She set it down slowly, as if buying herself time. "Ethan, please let me explain." "Explain?" My voice cracked with anger. "For 24 years you let me believe he was dead. You watched me grow up without a father, and you let me mourn someone who was alive. Why?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not look away. "Because if I told you the truth, you would have gone looking for him. And if you had gone looking, you could have been killed. Do you understand? I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting you." I shook my head, pacing across the kitchen floor. "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to take away my right to know my own father." She pressed her hands flat on the table, her voice breaking. "You were 4 years old, Ethan. 4. You had no way to understand the danger. He made enemies who would have hurt us both. Rob's betrayal nearly got him killed, and it could have gotten you killed too. I could not let that happen." Her words hit hard, but they didn't undo the damage. "So instead, you let me grow up in the dark. You let me think I was broken because my father was gone. You let me wonder every single day what kind of man he was, and you stood by while your brother smiled in my face, knowing he had betrayed my father." She covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing. "I wanted you to have a chance at a normal life. I thought lies would give you that chance. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I ruined everything." The sight of her breaking should have softened me, but my anger was too raw. "You did ruin everything. You raised me on secrets. You made me trust people who didn't deserve it. And now I don't know if I can trust you either." Her tears streamed freely now. I did what I thought was right. I would do anything to keep you safe, even if it means you hate me for it. The silence between us stretched heavy. I stared at her. The woman who raised me. The woman who cooked my meals and worked herself to exhaustion for me. The woman who had also stolen the truth from me. She was both protector and betrayer, and I didn't know how to reconcile those two truths. I left the house without another word. The cool morning air hit my face as I stepped outside, but it didn't clear the fog inside me. I drove aimlessly for hours, thinking about everything my father had said, everything my mother had admitted, everything my family had concealed. By the time the sun set, I sat on a quiet hill overlooking the town. The streetlights flickered on below me, little reminders of how ordinary life carried on for everyone else while mine had been torn apart. I pulled the passport from my jacket pocket, the photograph of my father staring back at me. He was alive for years after I thought he was dead. He could have been there, he could have tried harder, but he didn't. For the first time in my life, I realized I had not just lost a father. I had lost a mother too, not in body, but in trust. Trust is the foundation of family, and once it shatters, no amount of love can put it back the same way. I thought about what my father had said in the tape. Be stronger than I was. Do not let the weight of our family's mistakes crush you. The words echoed in my mind. I could not change the past. I could not force my father to return or undo my mother's choices, but I could choose what I carried forward. I took a deep breath and whispered into the night, I won't let your mistakes define me. That was the lesson I carried from all of it. Family can shape you, but family can also break you. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is to step away from the lies you were raised in and build something honest for yourself. When I finally drove home that night, I knew nothing would ever feel the same. My childhood had ended again, this time with the truth. And as painful as it was, I would rather carry the weight of truth than the comfort of lies. So I will ask you this. If you were in my place, would you forgive her? That is my story. A life built on lies, a truth uncovered in the most unexpected way, and a family I will never see the same again. I may never fully heal from what I learned, but I refuse to let it define me. Now, I want to hear from you. If you discovered that the people you trusted most had hidden something this big from you, would you forgive them? Or would you walk away? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, if it made you think about trust, family, or the secrets we carry, then please give this video a like. Share it with someone you think needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that dig deep into the human heart and the hidden truths we live with. Your support helps me keep telling these stories, and I am grateful for every one of you who listens.